G'day viewers, and welcome back to another vlog of Jen and Phil in the Philippines. Welcome back to our subscribed viewers, and hopefully this will be a little bit of information that you can use should you end up in the Philippines. The subject of the vlog today is the law in the Philippines. Now the reason Jen's not appearing in this is because law happens to be my field of expertise, as I've been involved with the law in one capacity or another in my home country. I have a good understanding of legislation, even though I 9 times out of 10 I talk like a wharfie. You know, I have been involved both in the law enforcement side of things, prosecution side of things, and technical law as far as employment is concerned, right down to contracts and whatever. Having said all that, none of that expertise and experience does very little good in a place like the Philippines, but at least it gives me an understanding of how the law should work, at least in a common law or street law situation is, and what to look out for and what you should do if you should run foul of the law. First thing I'll do is, okay, before we get deep into the subject, let's do the old thing about subscribe. Guys, I've got to thank everybody. Jen appeared in the last video for the first time, overwhelmed by the response and the kind words. She was absolutely tickled pink. She sends a love and to everyone out there that sent a kind comment, and she was very, very surprised at the response. We did hit, I think we started with just over 500 subscribers. Jen appeared, and we're now at 11 o'clock at night in the Philippines, where I'm doing this vlog. We're now sitting, last time I looked, at around about 605, so there was a huge boost, and I'm sure it wasn't because of my ugly head. So Jen will be appearing in far more videos from now on for you guys that asked her to do so. The law in the Philippines. The first thing I'm going to say, and I'll slow it down, and please wait until the end, because there is a fair bit to cover. It'll probably be a long video, but I want to cover as much as I possibly can, because the situation is that a lot from the West have a preconception about how law and order works, and this is definitely a country that, even with my experience, I was quite baffled at some of the things they do. The first thing I'm going to tell everybody, and I know it's something you've heard before, but in this particular country and other Asian countries, as an expat, as a foreigner living or visiting the particular country, everyone must remember one thing: ignorance of the law is not a defense. That's such a basic statement, and it is probably a mainstay of law all over the world, that simply saying to a law enforcement officer or the courts in a particular country, I had no idea, is not a defense. So they don't care, and even in our own countries, it's still not a defense. So you can't claim ignorance. And the reason I bring that up is because the law in this country, to say the least, is fluid. It's open for interpretation. If you get involved with an offence over here, by either your own making, i.e. you mean to get involved in some criminal activity, or by accident, and you get caught, it becomes a very sticky thing. And you can get in trouble in the law, with the law over here, and not even realise you're doing so. So I'm going to try to and attempt to give you some hints not to run foul of the law, at least in the Philippines. The other factor is that if you are involved in any form of activity that can be construed as unlawful in this country, you know, it's no use appealing to or even quoting what you think to be a fair law or what you perceive to be the law to a police officer over here. Because even though they do a college course, a so-called degree in law enforcement to become police officers, the reality of the situation is they are not well versed in law in their own country. They leave that up to lawyers and prosecutors. I suppose the first most amazing thing in relation to policing in this country is the police forces over here, at least in the Philippines, not so much in other countries I've been, but in the Philippines where I now reside, does not act in a way one Westerner or the Westerners perceive police should act. Now, what I mean to say by this is, usually when an offence takes place, a larceny, a theft, a rather minor or major, an assault, any of these, what we used to know as street offences, the normal procedure for an officer from our own countries would be they would attend at the scene, they'd do a certain amount of investigation, and they would act on that investigation, and the outcome can be numerous. It can lead to absolutely nothing, or it can lead to a diabolical situation as far as our own countries are concerned. The interesting thing about the Philippines is the law enforcement doesn't work in that particular way. And I'll explain that to you. Let's presume that you've had something stolen from you, and even though you observed the theft taking place, and the offender went next door, and you've observed that. And you call the police here, and the police come out and they do attend, and you explain to them what you've observed, and that you had item A, and you observed this person picking up item A, transporting it across the road or next door to his abode, and that he has your property in that building. Now, one can assume that on your complaint in our countries, the police would then act on that, go next door, knock on the door, and make some inquiries. If not directly, by way of warrant, enter the premises, retrieve your goods, arrest the offender, and then the normal procedures would take place. The offender would go to the lockup at the local station. He would be charged and possibly bailed at a later date. That, globally, is usually what happens in a very minor case. Over here, it doesn't work that way. You can attend and the police will inform you that you must build a case. You must file a case, which means, in essence, you have got to do all the policing yourself. You've got to write your statements, any other witnesses, you've got to get them, you've got to prove ownership of the goods, you've got to do all these things and virtually put what we used to call in the police force a brief together yourself. Now, one would then think you would just give that brief to the police and they would act on that. No, you go to a private solicitor, a lawyer, you present that brief and you state the offender is so-and-so, he lives at this particular address, which happens to be the house beside me, he's done this and this and this, and these are my witnesses, and that's the item, and that's how I can prove ownership of that particular item. It happened on that date, and that is my case. He would then accumulate everything you've presented to him, and he would then send it off to the prosecutor. Maybe via police, it may be direct prosecution, and the prosecutor, the area prosecutor, would go over that particular brief submitted by your lawyer and ascertain at that time, one, if you had a case. The next thing that prosecutor would do would contact the person that you are accusing and ask him what his defence is. That person would then put together through a solicitor, but if he's a squatter or a person of no means, he may even do it directly by attending at the police station and getting some assistance. But in essence, it doesn't matter how it happens. He gets his information or his defence on paper, and then that goes to the prosecutor. The prosecutor then reads both the defendant's defence and the complainant's complaint. And he ascertains through what's been presented to him whether or not the police should then, or he should issue a warrant and the police should act by way of arrest. So this does not and cannot happen overnight, and whether you know it or not, the law in the Philippines, as in most developing countries, from India through to Vietnam and whatever, is almost glacial in its speed. So by the time you actually put your briefs together, we all know that if he stole a phone, he stole any item, it's long gone. Now, you've presented that, the police have come down, they've arrested this chap, and you expect a court date. I'll tell you right now, you're not getting the property back. But on the same token, you're going through the situation of prosecuting this chap. And this occurs probably 3 to 6 months down the track, even before he's arrested. And then, of course, he makes bail if he's got some money or he's got some friends or family that will actually bail him out. And then you're awaiting a court date. Now, the court date may be anything from 6, 12, 18 months from the time that they acted upon that particular brief. Now, the reason I'm going over this is to give you the lunacy, as we know it, of the law over here. And you can obviously, without going into it, understand where that goes. In the meantime, there is other forms of, I suppose, retribution you can do rather than contact the police, because it's such a slow situation. And we're only talking at this stage of the game in regard to street offences, such as thefts, as I said beforehand. You can go to the barangay, which there is a barangay captain in the majority of townships and paruks all over the Philippines, and he is the head man that has been elected into that position. And don't be surprised if he's uneducated and one considered totally ignorant of the law himself or herself, whichever it may be, and he is supposed to sit in judgment, in minor judgment, and see if he can sort out a situation where both parties don't go to court. Now, both parties will be called to the barangay captain's office in the barangay, and they will again state their case. And he will suggest to the offender that, one, can you return the goods, and can we all kiss and make up, basically. It's totally up to you whether or not you want to pursue that. If not, you don't want to kiss and make up and get your goods back, or if he hasn't got the goods, or take a financial compensation, the barangay can't really do too much apart from that arbitration that's going on. So you've decided not to kiss and make up, well then it goes to the next tier, and which is the courts, and on and on and on it goes. And by the time it actually comes about, by the time you appear in court, there is no guarantee that you'll win. It's going to cost you a lot of money because you can't appear on your own behalf. You must have a lawyer. So, half the time in this country, the system is set up so you get, and it takes such a period of time, you get sick of doing it, and it all dissipates into nothing. So that's one thing, and that's to point out the strangeness of law here. The other thing is too, and I'll say this, all this information really is probably more relevant if you are living in the provinces. Although it's the same in the cities, the provinces are probably even more difficult when it comes to legal matters, to follow it through and to get something done, to get some assistance legally. Let's say, for instance, you've got a girlfriend and you end up in a domestic situation. Now, a domestic here may not be bashing someone, although it quite often is, or being involved in a physical altercation. It could be yelling and screaming, and we Westerners, when we lose our temper, we have a tendency to get loud. Someone has reported it, or she's done something, or she's attacked you with a knife, or whatever it happens to be. I'm talking from on your behalf at the moment. So she, living under your roof, whether it be your wife or your girlfriend or your de facto, has done something that prompts you to ring police. The police, once they find out after they attend that it is involved in a domestic, will have absolutely nothing to do with it. It is a family matter that must be sorted out by the family. And they will smile and nod and make sure that no one's about to be killed, and then they'll wander off into the distance. There are certain agencies in this country that protect women, so you want to watch yourself, and she can go and accuse you of basically anything without any real factual proof, and they will take her side. So be very, very careful about getting into a domestic situation, a yelling match, a fight with any female Filipina that you have any contact with, because again, it's one of those situations you're going to come off second best. We are behind the 8 ball here when it comes to a fair and impartial judgment with the law. The consensus is that the Westerner is probably in the wrong, and more than likely he is in the wrong. Don't get into arguments. Don't raise your voice. Try to avoid that at all costs. I'm not even up to the section where they actually take you into custody. I'm in an area of the law and that may take place on a day-to-day basis that is not all that serious, but can be sticky as far as getting you into a little bit of bother. And everything, when you're in bother with the government department, whether it be an agency or whether it be a police force and whatever, is eventually going to cost you money. It's not going to cost her or him or whomever the national you get into trouble with. It's going to cost you money, because everyone recognises the fact as a Westerner they expect you to be able to pay, and they don't mind if you pay to quieten things down. So it's not law as we know it in the provinces or in the Philippines. Having said that, these are the serious things that you've got to consider when you're living isolated. And a lot of you guys will come to this country, meet province women, and decide that it's quaint or it's fabulous or it's a new experience to go and live in the provinces. And there, once you're away from a major city, once you're away from expats that may be able to support you, and you're virtually isolated, surrounded by what you think are family and friends, and new acquaintances and people that smile and whatever, if it goes tits up, you are on your own. So be very wary of that. No white knight's going to race in. No one is going to be sympathetic towards you. It doesn't matter what's happened. So avoid police contact whenever possible. See if you can sort your own messes out. Do not stand on your dig and yell simply because you know you're right, because even though you're right, no one cares. Now, the other thing I'll say to the Americans and to a lot of Australians and whatever, what you perceive to be your rights and are your inalienable rights in your own countries are, on the whole, not applicable here. You can't scream the thing I've heard a million times in a million different places: I have my rights. This does not wash, and it certainly doesn't wash if you are yelling and trying to impress upon a person of authority in an Asian country that you think and you are demanding that you have rights. Because as soon as you raise your voice to a person of authority, such as a police officer, even though you may be right morally, you may even be right legally, you are causing that officer to lose face unless he does something. And I mean to say, usually these events take place when there's a million onlookers, and that officer knows that a lot of people are watching, and here is a big, tall Western immigrant coming over here and belittling, and they take it to heart, as I said beforehand, the Filipino way and the Filipino justice system, and he's screaming about things he doesn't know about. You will end up being arrested. And the attitude is, I don't know what I'm charging you with at the moment, but I know you've done something wrong, and we'll sort that out later. Now, another thing is, you can sit in that prison cell for 6 months, and you might be able to get your hands on Filipino legal books, and you can go through it and talk about all the technicalities under the sun. These people will not allow you to beat them. They will not allow you to show them up, and they will make the law flexible and malleable until it suits their situation and not yours. So stay away from being involved in the law here. It's going to end in tears, and they'll be your tears. The other things I'm going to suggest to you, things to steer totally away from, especially if you're in the provinces. There's only a few things here that can turn nasty very quickly. And when I say nasty, there's a few things here that can get you killed. And remembering in a couple of the other videos, for people that have followed the channel, there are a lot of guns in this country and a lot of access to guns, and a lot of people own guns, whether it be legally or illegally. And this is a machismo society. They are non-confrontational, but when they lose face, these little people may disappear, but there is a good chance that they will reappear when you least expect it and something diabolical will happen. As an expat over here, you run a very good chance of getting, at very worst, killed or thoroughly beaten, and at the best, probably deported if you get involved in the following. If you get involved in land disputes in this country are the main reason people are killed in the province. So even though you think you've bought a block of land or you've put it in your girlfriend's name, and for whatever reason it deteriorates into I own this and I'm being cheated or whatever, do not get involved in a land dispute. Do it legally, go to a lawyer and have them handle it. But also remember this, every legal matter in this country costs a lot of money, and especially costs Westerners a lot of money. So the first one is, do not get involved in any form of land dispute. The second one is, which will get you as good as dead as a land dispute, is getting involved in politics in this country. Apart from the fact that it is illegal under most of the visas you'll come in with, if not the permanent visas as a spouse, for a foreigner to be involved in any way, shape or form in the politics of this country. They are passionate about politics in this country. And it's if you get involved, if you espouse and take sides in this country, at the very worst you'll get, at the very best you'll get deported. Next one up is you'll get jailed for some spurious crime. The next one up is you will get beaten up. And the worst, and it happens quite regularly, not so much amongst expats, but it certainly happens amongst nationals, you will get shot. So steer away from those two things. The third one, and this may, if you're not a very clever guy and you don't really care, this is how you may get involved and you don't even know you're getting involved. Love triangles are the source of a number of murders in this country of expats. Now, a love triangle is you've met a young lady, and as we all know, a lot of these ladies are married, or at least have boyfriends, or have had boyfriends. The married ones may not be living with their husbands anymore, but due to the dynamic of no divorce here, there's a million and one reasons why he still may be in the background. We won't go into those, but be very, very careful about who you have relationships with in this country. And for God's sake, it's my advice to you that if you know the woman is married and she's out to do a bit of canoodling, simply because she finds you attractive or you're shouting her a meal from time to time, and she still has a spouse at home, as with the West, we all know the crimes of passion over there lead to a number of assaults and deaths. They do here as well. And a lot of the murders of expats over here are to do with love triangles. And it may not even be a situation whereas she's cheating on her husband. There has been times when it's been a complete and utter setup, where the woman has dangled the carrot in hopeful anticipation that you will take the bait, develop a relationship, get access to your funds, and the boyfriend or the husband will appear and he will dispose of the problem, or at least blackmail you. And remember this, in this country, whether they're living together or they're not living together, if you have relationships with a married woman, you run the risk of the adultery laws here, whether he's living there or not. It's a complicated situation here. So be very, very careful who you start relationships with and where the husband is, and whether or not he could pop up. Now, in defence, it sounds like, and to a certain degree, under certain circumstances, you're fairly well powerless in this country to protect yourself legally. And if a dispute does come up, and it's not, and it could be a petty dispute, but it's causing you aggravation, I would suggest to you this. The power in this country amongst people that live here, as soon as they have a dispute, the persona of these people is a bluff situation. That what they do is they try to gain a bluff type attack on people, and it usually works. The first person that states that I'm going to seek revenge on you for this particular offence against me, whether it be a personal attack, whether it be a theft or whatever, I'm going to file a case. As soon as they start talking about filing cases of which they threaten a great deal, and you may come across a situation where a Filipino will threaten you, I'm going to file a case against you. The reason they say that is because usually when they say that to another Filo, everyone backs down. And the reason they back down is because they know if this does go to court, if this man does file a case, it's going to cost me a huge amount of money to defend it. So they avoid that type of thing at all costs. And you can utilise this to your own advantage without overusing it. If you have a gripe with somebody and you know you're right, and this person is trying to browbeat you and try to bluff you into a situation where he benefits for whatever reason. The good thing about it is, if you're wise enough to say, okay, and make sure he finds out, whether it be directly or through the Filipino grapevine, you are going to file a case as an expat, and you're quite able to do so in the Philippines, you're going to file a case. Once he hears about that, it will have a great effect on him or her or whatever, because they know most expats have the financial capacity to be able to file a case. So this, you are bluffing a bluffer in one respect. And having said that, using a bluff to overcome someone, you must remember this, that if he stands his ground, you must be in a position to be able to file that case. So the greatest defence here in this country, especially in the provinces, if someone's giving you a hard time, is the threat of filing a case. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind if you're deciding to go to the provinces. Now let's talk about the awful thing where it appears, for whatever reason, whether you're guilty or not, that you come into custody in the Philippines. Americans, and I'm not saying this badly, but I know for a fact that in the United States, whether it be true in all states, I don't know, but it is perceived that you can take a phone call. Once you go into custody, you are entitled to a phone call. In fact, you demand the phone call, and you have the legislation to back that demand up. This is not applicable in this country. You do not, once you go into custody, demand anything. You can request, and if you're an expat, you request that they make a provision for you to contact your consulate. Now, 9 times out of 10, they'll fulfill that by allowing you access to the phone or a phone. But remember this, they'll allow you access to that phone, but they will not pay for it. So you must have access to funds once you're in custody. And not only for the phone call, but you may require funds available to you, whether it be with a girlfriend or a friend or someone you can trust that will actually come in and supply you with funds whilst you're in custody. That might be for a temporary lawyer. And the good thing about the grapevine, the philo grapevine, is you don't, to get information passed from one area to another, it really is better to get someone to actually hand deliver a message rather than hunt around looking for phone numbers, because most of the phones are not answered or they're not in existence, and trying to get hold of people in this country via phone is difficult. So when you go into custody, I don't know how you're going to do it, get the word out to somebody that you require a lawyer. But of course, in this country, you'll get plenty of people that will want to represent you as long as you have the money. And in previous videos, what I've said, keep a pool of money aside for emergencies. This just happens to be one. Nothing is done here on credit. You can't say, I'll organise the money at a later date. Very few people will do anything until they see the readies, the cash. You can promise all you want. So if you have not got access to funds, there is a good chance you'll be staying in that cell until the very slow wheels of justice turn and they either move you, incarcerate you in a jail system on remand, or they bail you. And to get bail, it's not on own reconnaissance or recognizance. It is a cash bail. And I'll tell you now, if there was a fellow charged with the same thing you're charged standing beside you, his bail may be 5,000, your bail will be 50,000. They use the excuse that you're a flight risk, but that's ridiculous, because 9 times out of 10 they'll take your passport off you anyway. The reality is they know you should be able to afford 50,000 rather than 5, and if you want to get out, that's what you're going to pay. Now, the other thing about bails is, let's say, for instance, you go through the system, you've paid 10, 20, 30,000 to get out, or 50,000 to get out, and you're awaiting trial. You come to what's called an amicable agreement. It's not going to trial. Both parties have been satisfied. No one wants to go to trial. You've paid your solicitor off for arranging this amicable settlement outside, or the closest thing we would call is arbitration, and you've come to an agreement. Okay, no longer a requirement for you to be on bail. Do not expect to go back to the police station and say, right, it's all over, Red Rover, I'm as free as a bird, I've either been found not guilty, or I have been the subject of an amicable agreement, where's my bail money? The likelihood of you getting that bail money is the same likelihood that you'll see Jesus Christ sitting at a diner next Tuesday. It's just not going to happen. They'll go through the motions and say you've got to do this and you've got to do that. That bail money is gone. And it has been spent, usually amongst the police that took it off you, a huge period ago. So don't even go back. Your bail, as soon as you hand it over, is gone. So forget that. Again, get out. Don't worry about creating waves even after the situation. Look at it this way. The bail money was really the penalty for you even getting involved, whether it was consciously or unconsciously with the police. That's the price you pay. So that's about it as far as the law is concerned. Consulate must have someone on the outside. And when I say you've got to have money in jails, they do not feed you in the jail. You've got to have either someone deliver food to you in most of the provincial jails or lockups, or at least pay for all your amenities. There is nothing provided when you're in the provinces when you're in the lockup. It's all reliant on outside sources. So you can see just through what I've spoken to at the moment getting involved in any form of legal activity over here, legal activity as far as becoming or getting the attention of the police and being involved in anything in regard to police or the authorities is going to cost you a lot of money, and nothing here is done quickly. And if you're over here for a couple of weeks and you get caught in a situation and you can't get out of it, there is nothing to guarantee that you'll be out the next day, the next morning. They will hold you indefinitely if they have to, or until you get into court, or at least palms are greased, or considerations are made. So avoid it like the plague. That's about it. That's all I can think of at the moment off the top of my head. If you have any questions about the law, and just as an example of that, a lot of people ask me in regard to buying property in this country. Yes, there is a way to buy property in this country. There's a number of ways, but it's not so much the ability to buy property. It's when you look at property, because of the legal status of that particular property, the ownership, the title, and the myriad of different ways people can own, and I'm talking about nationals property in this country, it's a long and convoluted process, and if it's not done right, you are going to get caught. So if there's any questions or anyone would like me to do a vlog on purchasing property in this country, I'm only too happy to do it. But it's not an easy process, but you know, there is ways to do it and do it correctly. Okay, that's all from me from now. I hope it's of some assistance. Subscribe if you would. Thumbs up, thumbs down if it was help. I'm sorry it went a little bit long, but I think it's important, and you'll probably discard this in your mind until you do have a situation. Hopefully it won't be you, but you may be the one that gets involved with the law over here once you're here for a myriad of different reasons. Okay guys, good night from the Philippines. It's about, I suppose, 1 o'clock in the morning at the moment. You'll notice there's no background noise like there usually is. That's because that's the reason I'm doing it at night. I wish you well until the next vlog, and on the next vlog I'll get Jen to do it so you don't have to look at my ugly head. Cheers for now.